late at night, rain pounding the streets, and the elevator stops between floors. One woman and one unknown man with yellow raincoat. What began as an ordinary evening quickly turned into a nightmare she would never fully escape. Years later, in a news broadcast, the woman saw that same man's face. That's when she realized she had looked into the eyes of South Korea's most notorious serial killer. This is the story of the woman who met the Hwaseong serial killer in an elevator and survived. Between 1986 and 1991, the city of Hwaseong in South Korea became the scene of one of the country's most infamous crime sprees. Over a period of just 5 years, 10 women, ranging in age from 13 to 71, were brutally murdered. They were attacked in their homes, often in the middle of the night, their lives taken with chilling precision. The murders were sexually motivated, leaving the entire nation in a state of shock and fear. The victims came from a variety of backgrounds. Some were students, others housewives, and a few elderly women living alone. Despite these differences, the killer had a terrifyingly consistent method. He would break into homes quietly, often through unlocked doors or windows, and attack without warning. The randomness of the attacks left families and communities on edge. No woman felt truly safe in her own home. From the very first murder, the Hwaseong killings gripped the public's attention. Police launched one of the largest investigations in South Korean history, interviewing thousands of people and searching for any clue that could lead to the perpetrator. Yet despite their efforts, the killer remained elusive. Over 2,000 suspects were questioned in connection with the murders, but the investigation repeatedly hit dead ends. Errors and limitations in the investigation compounded the fear. In the 1980s, forensic technology was limited and DNA analysis was not yet advanced. Witness statements were sometimes conflicting, and early leads often went cold. There were instances where police focused on the wrong suspects, consuming precious time and resources. Some investigators even faced public criticism for mishandling evidence, further eroding public trust. Meanwhile, the nation lived under a shadow of terror. Parents warned their daughters not to walk alone. Neighbors kept extra watch at night, and the media reported every new detail with both horror and urgency. The unpredictability of the killer made ordinary life feel dangerous, and every woman in Hwaseong feared she could be next. It wasn't until modern forensic breakthroughs, specifically DNA profiling, that the case began moving toward resolution. Advances in technology allowed investigators to revisit old evidence and identify connections that were previously impossible to detect. This eventually led to the identification and confession of Lee Chun-jae, a man already imprisoned for a separate murder and sexual assault. His capture finally brought closure to a case that had gripped South Korea for more than 3 decades. Rain hammered the rooftops and streets without pause, and the woman's shoes squelched against the wet asphalt. Her hair clung to her face, and the heavy bag weighed on her arm. She hurried toward the entrance of the building, hoping for the small refuge the elevator might offer. The elevator doors opened, and a man in a yellow raincoat stepped inside. For a moment, the woman didn't dare look him directly in the eyes. His gaze was direct and intrusive, his movements slow but deliberate, as if measuring her every step. He didn't press any floor buttons, simply stood there watching her carefully. Her instincts screamed, "This is not a normal encounter." She quickly pressed her own floor button, and the elevator began to rise. Her heart pounded, her breathing quickened, and every muscle tensed. The man's stare followed her, intense and threatening, even though he said nothing. When the elevator doors opened on her floor, she bolted out as fast as she could. The woman ran through the hallway, her heart pounding. The metallic thud of the elevator behind her told her that that the man had stepped into the corridor, slowly but surely. She didn't turn to look. She knew she didn't want to see. At the far end of the long hallway, her own door came into view. She rushed toward it, bent toward the handle, and began pounding on the door with trembling hands. Of course, the door didn't open. Her family wasn't home today. The only thing she could rely on was her own keypad lock. Her hands were shaking too much to type the code. In the middle of the hallway, the man stopped, completely motionless. His yellow raincoat seemed frozen in place. The hood shaded the mask, and his gaze was still angled downward, just like earlier. Then the man slowly turned around. It felt as if he had decided to retreat. The woman paused for a moment to breathe. It was as though the man believed she was banging on someone else's door. Maybe he thought she wasn't going into her own home. Maybe he imagined someone waiting inside. The man began walking back toward the elevator, calmly, almost indifferently. The woman waited until the echo of his footsteps faded. Only then did she reach toward the keypad. Her fingers were damp and the buttons slipped under her touch. Beep, beep, beep. Then something happened that made cold sweat cover her skin. The man stopped. The whole corridor went silent. Then the yellow figure turned abruptly. And this time, he didn't walk. He ran, full speed, so fast that the edges of the raincoat flared out behind him. The woman managed to type the last digit just as her heart leapt into her throat. The lock made a small clicking sound, and she yanked the door open. She darted inside. Just as she was about to slam the door shut, she saw a flash of bright yellow raincoat rushing toward her at incredible speed from the shadows of the hallway. She slammed the door closed a fraction of a second before a heavy impact hit the outside. She pressed her back against the door and held her breath tight in her chest. The hallway was silent again. The man didn't try the door anymore. After a moment, his footsteps faded, and the metallic echo of the elevator filled the building. The woman locked every latch and slid down to the floor, shaking, but alive. Even with the door locked, peace did not come. The evening quiet and the rain suddenly felt threatening. Every door, shadow, and sound in the building seemed like a potential threat. Her instincts in the elevator had saved her life, and that moment stayed with her for decades, a reminder of how quickly an ordinary situation can turn deadly. Years later, the woman sat in her living room, illuminated by the light of the television. She didn't know why the old memories resurfaced tonight. A news broadcast began, shifting between investigation details and suspects. Then suddenly, her heart stopped. There he was, in all the familiar intensity, the same man, the same yellow raincoat. The gaze that had followed her in the elevator now stared directly from the screen. Her hand trembled, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. She saw the man she had encountered so closely, and realized how narrowly she had escaped death. The broadcast also showed police comments and images of the crime scenes, but her eyes could not leave him. She remembered the elevator's atmosphere, the sound of the rain, the silence, and the fear she had felt in that moment. Everything came back as vividly as it had the first time, and with it, a profound sense of relief. She had survived. In 2019, Lee Chun-jae confessed. He admitted responsibility for all 10 Hwaseong murders, as well as numerous other crimes that had previously remained unsolved. His confession finally closed one of South Korea's most notorious crime sprees and provided some measure of relief for the families of the victims who had lived for decades without answers. Stories like these endure because they speak to something deep at the core of human instinct and survival. The elevator encounter and the woman's near miss are examples of moments when ordinary life suddenly turns into life-threatening danger. Stories like this remind us that even when the world feels safe, threats can lurk just around the corner, sometimes unseen and unexpected. They also illustrate the human ability to recognize danger instinctively. The woman did not know why she felt uneasy, but her instincts guided her to make the right decision, leaving the elevator in time. This emphasizes how important it is to listen to our inner warning system and trust it, even when reason cannot yet explain the situation. Survival often depends on these small, intuitive decisions. At the same time, these stories challenge us to consider the moral and psychological dimension. How often do we pass through life without noticing danger? How many times have we ignored a small, uncomfortable feeling or an instinctive warning, continuing on our path, unaware that it could have been our salvation? Do you want more content like this? Click like and subscribe the channel to stay updated on the next videos. Thank you for watching.